It's good to have you stay with us. Now, TVC News has confirmed independently that the Chief of Staff to the President, Abba Kyari, has tested positive for the coronavirus. President Muhammadu Buhari was also tested, but his result came back negative. The presidency is functioning with a reduced staff strength and had announced the indefinite suspension of the weekly Executive Council meeting. Staff within the office of the President and the Vice President are observing the minimal contact rule to reduce the spread of the virus. The Chief of Staff had visited Germany a few weeks ago, accompanied by other Nigerian officials, and on his return he observed the period of self-isolation. Our Abuja Deputy Chief, Bureau Chief, Femi Akande, has more on this story. Femi, thanks for joining in. Now, it is confirmed that the President tested negative and the Chief of Staff, Abba Kyari, is positive. What else have you heard?
Yes, Olimisi, this is cheering news to a lot of people, Nigerians, who are concerned about the President contracting this coronavirus, because looking at the president's age, it is believed that people who are of that age of Mr. President are highly susceptible to contracting this virus. But for the Chief of Staff, he went into self-isolation voluntarily, having returned from Germany, which is considered a high-risk country, and he came via London, another high-risk country. He has been in self-isolation before he started showing symptoms of the coronavirus, and then the test was carried out to ascertain if indeed he has been infected, and that test came out positive. And you know, the Chief of Staff has been concerned about the safety of Nigerians. We saw just last week a leaked memo where he wrote a letter to the leadership of the National Assembly, the Speaker of the House of Representatives in particular, telling him to advise lawmakers who just returned from the US and other high-risk countries in Europe to submit themselves for the normal health screening carried out at the airport. And he was dismayed about their refusal to be tested. So he has been very concerned about all of these, and he also submitted himself to self-isolation and the testing. And it came out positive, but he is observing that self-isolation, and treatment, we believe, is being administered as we speak.
All right, so a couple of the senior aides are self-isolating. Can you confirm if they have been tested?
Well, that is correct. A couple of them would certainly need to go into self-isolation, because some of them would have come in contact with the Chief of Staff, those that work in his office, even those that work in the presidency would have come in contact with people in his office one way or the other. But for the National Council, the NCDC, they do not test persons only if those persons are showing symptoms of the coronavirus disease. That is when tests are carried out. But they just generally advise for people who have been exposed or who have returned from these countries with high risk to go into self-isolation. It is when they begin to show these symptoms that then they call the hotline that is already made available, and then the NCDC will then come and test them to see if they will test positive to the coronavirus disease. But people working in the office of the Chief of Staff and some other offices in the presidency have been advised to go on self-isolation, and that is being observed in the presidency. You know, they have also cut down on the staff strength of people working in the administrative offices in the presidential villa, just in a way to slow down the spread of this coronavirus on Emisi.
So looking at where this story is coming from, the villa now, is locking down Abuja a possibility, considering the number of people who have been exposed? What steps are being taken to protect the first family?
Yes, nothing is impossible, Olimisi. Looking at how fluid the situation is, the numbers keep rising. Just last night, it was 40 confirmed cases, and the latest figure we're hearing that there are about 42 confirmed cases now, and it keeps rising, and it's the situation is like that all over the world too. Cities are being locked down. Even big cities in Europe are being locked down. Their health system is being overwhelmed by the outbreak of this virus. So we expect the same in Abuja if the federal government considers that a necessity. If the situation seems to be getting out of hand, we expect them to take those drastic measures. You know, the President Muhammad Buhari, has said that the safety of lives will come first ahead of our business or economic interests. He's putting the safety of lives first, and if it means shutting down the capital city, Abuja, or taking whatever drastic measures, they would not hesitate to do that. We already know that the airports have been shut to international flights, land borders have been closed. The Federal Executive Council meeting and also the Council of State meeting have been suspended indefinitely. All of these are measures put in place. And even the First Family are also coming out to encourage Nigerians not to panic and to stay safe during this period. We've seen the statement from the First Lady, Aisha Buhari, urging Nigerians not to panic, also advocating for a lockdown. She also came out to state that her daughter, who just returned from Europe, one of the high-risk countries, has also gone into self-isolation as one of the precautionary measures advised by the NCDC. And all of these measures are put in place, and whatever steps will be taken to keep Nigerians safe, we believe the federal government will not and should not hesitate to do so.
Are we hearing anything regarding the civil service, cutting down workforce and reducing capacity, the civil service now?
Yes, a circular was issued yesterday after the presidential task force met and made certain pronouncements. The head of the task force, that's the secretary to the government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, made those pronouncements on cutting down, reducing public gatherings, shutting down the land borders. We saw the memo coming from the office of the head of service asking civil servants from the grade level 1 to 12 to stay away from work for a period of 2 weeks until the situation is brought under control. And just senior civil servants and those on essential duties are the ones at work, going to work as we speak. But civil service has also cut down their staff strength. Even the private sector in Abuja, in other cities across the country, have had to cut down their staff strength, all in a bit to slow down the spread of the virus, which seem to be rapidly spreading across the country. Let me see.
All right, Femi, thank you so much for that information. We will expect to hear more from you as the story unfolds.